welcome to Today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business, presented by FL Montreal. My name is Dan Delmar, along with our new co-host for season number 12, Michael Newton, the big boss at FL Montreal. Michael, welcome back to the show, and thanks for joining me.
Hello, Dan. That's about as close as you're going to get to hearing Josh's voice. Josh has been the host of this show for the first 11 seasons. He was the voice and the heart of all of this. But for those of you that are aware, Josh has taken a change in career path, and that has taken him away from the professional accounting and has also taken him away from the radio. So we wish him well and certainly thank him for 11 great years on this show.
And Josh will be back as a guest co-host, by the way. So if you do miss him and do miss that booming hello, it will be back. And I have to say thank you, Josh, just as a friend, for having such dedication to the show for so long. And this is back, Mike, 12 years ago, no one was talking about sponsored content for business. Everyone was doing infomercials and irregular ads. This kind of program is really unique. And today, I think looking back, it was a really innovative idea that both you and Josh put together. And thanks to Josh for putting so much effort into this.
It's one of those things that you try and, what's the old expression, you try and make lemonade when somebody hands you lemons. This was born out of a great recession initiative whereby we were looking to get exposure while everybody else was cutting costs. And Josh and I, started to look at the opportunities, and he'd always wanted to have a radio show. He had the voice for it. It kind of took on a life of its own. What started out as, what keeps you awake at night, and has certainly evolved not only in name, but in content and in style.
So stay tuned. There'll be more features. There'll be more complimentary stuff on the web for today's entrepreneur fans, and also different ways that you can get it as a podcast as well. So we'll be in touch about those details.
Dan, I would just like to throw in one comment before we begin. This is very important. After 11 years of occasionally sitting in for Josh, where you always said, this is Today's Entrepreneur with guest host Mike Newton sitting in for Josh Miller. When you bring Josh back, I can't wait to hear you say, this is Josh Miller sitting in from Mike Newton. That's all I wanted to throw.
It'll be so strange. I almost said Josh right off the top.
I'm sure it'll happen a few times.
It's just the rote memory thing. But we are looking forward to having him back on the show, and new contributors as well. So it's going to be another season filled with lots of inspiration, recorded remotely, by the way, because we are continuing to practice social distancing, and we're recording this via Zoom using the latest in technology. So our guest tonight, by the way, is someone I'm really excited about. Once in a while, you guys give me a pick, and this one was one of my picks. It's David Côté from Loop Mission. He's going to tell us about his business. He buys unwanted fruits and veggies, ugly fruits and veggies that may not be sold in supermarkets. He then juices them into juices and smoothies, and even gin and dog treats. It's a really remarkable company, and talk about the circular economy. No one does this better in Montreal than I think these days than Loop Mission, and I love their juice. So we'll talk to David Côté in a little bit. But first, Mike, our news and notes. And we begin, of course, with post-COVID, and that's really what's on everyone's mind. We did these series of emergency COVID broadcasts over the summer with all the relief information, the tax advice. Now we're a few months later. We're settling into what's being described as the new normal. What do entrepreneurs have to do to prepare their workplaces for this new normal this fall?
Well, I think it's one of these situations that is foreign to a lot of people. We're really good at fixing up the physical side of things. We can put up the barriers, we can put up the plastic, we can make sure that we've got the PPE to protect everybody. But the biggest challenge for most people coming back is going to be the mental side of things. We have most of our people have been working. Our team has been working from home since middle of March. For them to start coming back to the office, there's a massive hurdle here for people to overcome. And I think most businesses are dealing with that. That's similar. As much as it was difficult for people to cross that threshold back in March to go work at home, it's going to be doubly hard for them to cross the threshold and come back.
In terms of relief that is out there, rent relief, et cetera, are those programs still ongoing, especially at the retail level?
Yeah, the SECRA program is still out for rentals. The CEWS, as they call it, CEWS, is still there, and the wage subsidy. You can look at that and you can say this is great. The governments continue to support and help us through, which I think is really what government has purpose should be at the end of the day. However, it gives you an indication of how concerned everyone is when we keep extending some of these deadlines. It means that we're still a ways away from solving this and getting everybody back on their feet. And there's we're certainly not out of the water. I think you look at the estimates for the coming fall with everybody back to school as it starts to get cool out again. There's still a big concern from an economic standpoint, but having said that, the show must go on. We have businesses to run, we have an economy to run, we have people to protect, and we have to find a way to meld that into an environment that allows people some mental sanity as they come back to work.
Talking about the new normal, our one article you wanted to mention here from Fast Company says that our definition of success is holding business back, and it's time for a new one. Indeed, defining success quarter by quarter in this situation is a little bit difficult.
Yeah, it's if even before COVID, you could see this starting to permeate through businesses, and certainly those that are kind of ahead of the curve from a culture perspective, where bottom line profitability was no longer going to be sufficient, certainly for the younger generation, to keep score. It was environmental awareness, it was carbon neutral, it was mental health issues. So what we're seeing now is that COVID has taken something that has been moving its way along and kind of thrown it upon us to have a new way to start looking at what is it we are going to measure. I mean, for many years, Fortune 500 is ranked its members based on gross revenue, top to bottom. Is that really an ongoing scenario? I mean, people talk about work happiness scorecards. They're talking about culture assessments. This has almost become the environmental push of the business world.
This piece from Elemental, which is an interesting outlet, long-form outlet on Medium. Your surge capacity is depleted. It's why you feel awful. I mean, everyone's having bandwidth issues, I guess, as they say, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, the bandwidth issues we're talking about here is pretty much in your brain. I mean, there are certain people that thrive, and I happen to be one of them, under crisis. And the adrenaline rush that comes with raising the game is just that. It's an adrenaline rush. It lifts you to new levels. And for those people that thrive on problem solving, and you can call them type A personalities, you can call there's different names for them. The reality is in times of crisis, we are at our best. Unfortunately, it also means that when it slows down and we're not back to normal, we also crash further than everybody else. What goes up must come down. And I think what we're seeing is, when you talk about the surge capacity, the capacity is really how much capacity do you have to play in an environment that takes you out of your comfort zone, circle the wagon, protect people around you, protect your businesses. But you know what? It's not uncommon to find yourself collapsing afterwards. And I think we're seeing a lot of that. A lot of people that did a phenomenal job during, the first 3 or 4 months, hit the summer without vacation, without an opportunity to turn off, and are still asked to be on, who are emotionally drained. And I think that's where it's not uncommon, and people need to start to recognize that they're not they're not way out there in left field if they're still feeling the pain from all of this.
So Mike, our first permanent show together, and I'm very happy to welcome David Côté to the program. David is the co-founder of Loop Mission. They take ugly, unwanted fruits and veggies, make them into juices, smoothies, all kinds of products. David, welcome to the show, and congratulations on your business.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be there.
The first thing that when I sit down to start looking at our guests, I do a little bit of research, and I go to the Loop Mission website. The first thing that popped out at me is the rescue mission mission statement, and that your goal of, as Dan said, reusing unwanted fruit. Funny enough, as we came on Zoom for the first thing, for our listeners, unfortunately, this is radio, but David's sitting there with his whippet dog, and with a beautiful face, who's a rescue. And I start into my story about 2 Italian greyhounds who are rescues. Dan then turns around and says, "Hey, here's my dog who's a rescue." So, I think there's a reason why you caught our attention, other than the fact that Dan likes his stuff. David, what drove you to this environment? Where do you come from? Where, what drives you to do what you do on a daily basis?
Um, I get that question a lot, and it seems like I've been an entrepreneur all my life. Like even when I was 8 years old, I was going in the forest to pick up some stones, and I was throwing them on other rocks to split them open, and I was selling them $1 to the neighbors, and I guess they were kind enough to buy them from me, even if they had nothing interesting. And then at 16 years old, I left the country. I got a little van that I got on Kijiji or Craigslist, I don't remember, and I put a little bed in it, and I left with my girlfriend. And I started a little travel that to me I was coming back in a few months, but I left for 8 years. So from 16 years old to 24, I traveled the world, really. I went here and there. I was planting trees in British Columbia. I was working on farms in Hawaii and Morocco and Guatemala and Mexico. And that was my university. I didn't go to school. I didn't go to university. All my friends were students. And when I was 16, I didn't know what I wanted to become, really. So I decided to, instead of taking a degree in something I wasn't sure of, I will just travel the world, really. And when I came back to Montreal, I decided to open a restaurant with no money. I had absolutely $0. So I went to a banker. I asked for $300,000. She laughed at me, and she told me I should do my income taxes from the last 8 years before I ask for money.
Yeah.
And then I started catering from my apartment. So I really started with nothing, bootstrapping totally. Selling, wraps and sandwiches out of my cooler, strapped on my bicycle. And that's how I became an entrepreneur. And slowly but surely, I started making kombucha, which is a fermented tea. And it became Rise Kombucha, as you probably maybe know in Canada. Yeah. We're the biggest kombucha brand in Canada. And with that brand, I've learned everything. I made all of the mistakes an entrepreneur can do in all the spheres, in HR and marketing and everything. I did so many mistakes. But even with all those mistakes, I actually made a profit, and the business became successful. And really what brought me to food waste today is a simple phone call. Really, I got a phone call from one guy that I didn't know, and he told me he was throwing away 16 tons of fruits and vegetables every single day. And that phone call freaked me out. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that any company out there could throw so much food in one single day, 365 days a year. There's not even a holiday for food waste. It happens every single day. So I visited the warehouse in Anjou in eastern Montreal, and he showed me everything he was wasting. And I had the shiverings, and I said, that's it. I need to start it. I was with my girlfriend that I just met at that time, that she was working in sustainability. Her name is Julie. And her dream was to start a business that the more you sell of something, no matter how much big you get growing, you always do a better things for the environment, really. So the more you sell, the better it is. And so that's how we started the project, really.
It's interesting because one of the lines on the website is, "We aren't dumpster divers," and I got a good chuckle out of that, because I think Dan, when you open the show based on looking at working on recycling fruits and veggies, or taking the ugly fruits and veggies, you kind of get the figure of of David and his partner sitting at dumpsters behind a restaurant, kind of cleaning out and doing. I think how does this work? I mean, do they bring produce to you? Do you pick it up? Where's the exercise lead itself to?
Yeah. So we started with a co-packer just to test the business model, because we weren't sure when we said we were going to make a food product with the rejected produce. We were basically saying exactly the opposite than all of the food manufacturers have been saying in the last 35 years, right? If you look at any food package out there and you look at the back, no matter, even if it's a cheap potato chip bag, it's still going to say that they handpicked by hand the best high quality potatoes to make those amazing potato chips, right? And we were going out with a new business saying we've selected the ugly and the rejected one. So that was our biggest fear. So before opening a factory, we started with a co-packer and just to test to see if the model was sustainable. And to our amazing surprise, our mission, everybody was ready for it. Nobody was kind of doubtful of our mission, and nobody found it disgusting or anything. People understood the food waste, and so as soon as we got that we had a business in hands, we opened a factory inside the produce warehouse of Courchaine-Larose, which is the biggest supplier of produce in Canada. Okay. And those are the guys that throw away 16 tons every day. So we've built basically a transformation center right in their warehouse. So there's no transportation for the produce. So we transform them into cold pressed juices right on the spot. So that basically limits all the transportation. It's kind of nice. And then we buy it. You know, circular economy, the idea is we're not a non-profit that depends on donation or anything. We're really a for-profit company that take the overstock and gives money for it, you know.
You know, it's interesting. I'm going to have one of my partners, Nick Moratis, on at the end, who's one of our tax gurus. And, you know, one of the things that accountants are known for are organizational charts and flow charts. I have to say the second page of your website is probably one of the greatest visuals I have ever seen for a description of a business. And for those of you that get a chance to go to loopmission.com, scroll down to the picture of what's there, which is, I guess, pretty much like a chart in your manufacturing processing chart. And it's great. I mean, it sums everything up on one page. So kudos to you, David, for being able to describe what you do so clearly.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
Dan, you know, one of the things that we always try to grasp with entrepreneurs is, you know, what have we done? What have they done? Sorry, you know, good and bad and ugly. And David, you made a point earlier about all your mistakes were done in your previous business. And one or two that stand out to you that you know, you learned from, that you think other people make, that, you know, you could kind of guide them in the right direction.
Oh, there's so many, Mike. But I think the biggest mistake I've done at first was to really basically not trust my instincts, because I had no experience. I had such a zero experience in business. And because I didn't go to school, I felt like I was so ignorant in the matter that, you know, so I basically surrounded myself with consultants and people with high degrees and lots of certificates and degrees, but that I got them because of their resume, but I didn't really have a good connection with them, you know? So I think that's the first mistake I did, because I felt like the resume was all, you know, to basically kind of work with me with my lack of it. And I think one of the thing I can tell on young entrepreneurs that starts is to actually surround yourselves with people you can drink a beer with, you know, not with even if people don't have necessarily the most amazing resume, if they have the passion and the desire to, you know, to achieve something and really a connection with you, then there's a good chance that you're going to be more happy at work and you're going to bring your business further if you only take people for their brain or what their knowledge, really.
And David, I have to compliment you on the marketing. And I also did this months ago before I knew you were going to be on the program. I was chatting with Marie-Claude Lortie from La Presse, food critic, very well known. And so she's very discerning on these things. And she was also noticing a trend, and that is that your juices don't always taste exactly the same. And I had a really interesting experience with that. And I think that's a good thing. And I'll explain why. I got an email from you guys saying we just got this massive load of strawberries. Do you remember the email that I'm referring to?
Of course.
So I saw the email and I'm reading with great interest. You scored this huge delivery of strawberries. About a week later, or 2 weeks, I buy some Loop juice and the Morning Glory brand that I tend to like, and I'm tasting it's just ever so slightly strawberry heavy. And I'm thinking, what a beautiful thing. I mean, this is a direct connection to a piece of marketing that I haven't really had before. Can you talk about that? Was that a planned rollout, David? I've honestly never had that kind of connection to a juice before.
Amazing. I'm glad you're connected to the juice. That sounds amazing.
Love the juice.
Company. So, yeah, it was, you know, when you started cold pressed juice companies, and I guess we're not a juice company anymore, really a circular economy project that does so many products now. But at first we were juice, and we realized that, you know, looking at the food industry in general, everything tastes the same all the time. And you learn even in marketing and food manufacturing that customers always want the same thing. And if the taste changes just a little bit, you're in troubles because they're not going to go back to it. And the reality is, you know, when you make juice with no added ingredients, with no sugar added, with no water, with no pasteurization, we don't decide if there was rain in Chile when the pineapple grew on that specific month, right? And we don't decide if there's humidity in the truck when it comes from Spain or whatever. So the fruits and veggies never have the same amount of water or the same amount of bricks, which is the sugar content in it. So the juice have to taste different. If the juice is always tasting the same, there's kind of something wrong about it. And if you actually really make a juice at home with normal fresh produce, it will never taste the same. So for us, it was something we were a bit scared when we started the project that consumers will actually not like it, but at the same time, it's kind of a seal, you know, it's kind of a proof that our juice are always fresh and always done every week, really.
Very interesting. It's, you know, I guess you can equate that to wine, right? At the end of the day, the soil content, the weather that's been around, and anything that's growing naturally and is reproduced into a natural type of food for us, you are going to get a variation, and then that's I guess that says something, Dan, about the quality of the nutrients and the fruit and veggies that they're using.
I thought that was so interesting. I mean, I've never seen a product change before my eyes before, and I thought that was it was great. You know, I think it's different, certainly, David. And you mentioned the repetitive and sort of bland nature of products that are expected to be all the same. Have you had any complaints, by the way? Do people challenge that philosophy because they're not used to the product shifting?
No, we have some comments. I mean, people write to say my juice this week is different than last week. But it's never really a complaint. It's kind of more of a fact and a statement. And you know what's amazing is that with our business model, you know, when you start a business, normally you look at trends and, you know, market studies and, you know, what's the flavor and trend to actually decide what kind of products you're going to make. And with circular economy, when you work with waste and byproduct from the industry, we have to basically do the opposite. So we look at the problem, which is a specific product that's wasted, and then we have to find a way to transform it into something new that the market is going to need, you know. And so it's kind of a counterintuitive thing to do as a business owner at first, but at the same time it's amazing because we feel like we solve a problem every time, right? And so we're going to say like, oh, we need to launch a tequila because tequila is in trend. No, you know, if ever I have something in overstock that I can make tequila with, then I'll do it, or else I'm never going to do it.
So interestingly enough, we're talking about juice. We're talking about some pretty, I guess, what we'll consider to be pretty basic stuff. So talk to us about the two things that really caught my attention. And one is gin. The other are dog treats. You know, we're going to go from human consumption of the health to the gin and dog treats. And preferably we don't mix them up. So.
Yeah, well, you know, when we started as a juice company, we were not expecting to do so many products, but then we started getting phone call, right? And then we were sitting at the table, we were winning a prize for a food manufacturer innovation, which was our smoothies that we make with sobays. And we got the lady from Yum Yum, the crispy kernel company, sitting at our table saying, hey, guys, I actually throw away tons of potato cuttings every week in our potato chips factory. Can you guys do something with it? And of course, it's hard for me to say no. And whenever I hear something that gets wasted, I'm like, okay, let's find a solution. So I started calling distilleries, and I spoke with those guys at Mariana in Trois-Rivières, and they said, yeah, we can totally distill it and make alcohol out of it, grain alcohol, and then we could make a gin. So we made it. We launched a gin about 7 months ago with ginger juice, lime juice, also from discarded produce, and potato cuttings distilled, really, and it's an amazing gin. It's sold in the SAQ. We're already the 4th best-selling gin in Quebec, which is amazing. This also we were not expecting, and yeah. And then we, you know, when we started the project, you know, making juice was creating a lot of byproduct, which is fiber and pulp, because we extract the juice and we leave the fiber and the pulp on the side. So we right away partner up with a dog treat company called Wilder and Harrier, and they basically buy our fiber and pulp and transform it back into vegan dog treats. So that's what they do for training treats. And you know, it's endless. You know, because we have so much pulp still going on, we're also launching a line of cookies pretty soon in the bakery and the grocery stores made with our pulp, and also the overstock from the beer industry, which is a grain, basically barley, that's been used for making the beer.
Fascinating. It's one of the things you said at the beginning of this interview is you traveled for 8 years in the van and planting trees and doing all of that. I mean, clearly, no matter what you seem to pop up doing, David, there's a sustainability and an environmental angle to it, and I think it's phenomenal. We listen to a lot of people who talk about trying to protect the environment or do something different, and the fact that you have turned this into not only a reality but an operating reality is very much a testament to you and your partners as you do this. And I guess that will segue into probably my biggest last question on this topic, and likely possibly the most diciest of topics, and that's having partners. It's a very interesting environment as an entrepreneur to take on partners, to provide, I guess, an open spectrum. A lot of people are brought up under the corporate mentality where it's a top-down kind of triangular function, but the more partners you bring into the fray, the more that you flatten that triangle. So David, in your previous business, you had quite a few partners, though I will say in the most current one, you've decided to scale that down. Talk to us a little bit about being in business with other partners.
For sure. Well, when I started, I think I was young and naive, and even with my first company, I was actually giving shares. I was like, "Oh, I like you. I think I'm going to give you some shares." I was very young, so I ended up having so many partners. And then, when the hard decisions comes, or when the money gets hard to actually get, or when the business is going well, it's always kind of easy. But when the business is not going well, and you need to get to reinvest in, or you need a cash investment or anything, then it gets actually very complicated. And the more partners you get, everybody kind of want to pull on the blanket, and it's not every partners that have the same desire to grow the business. Some have more personal desire to actually make some dividends and things like this. So it gets very complex, and actually it's mostly time consuming, having to manage your partners, having to always update them to make sure that everybody's happy, making all of those board meetings. It's so time consuming, right? And that kind of can basically defocus you from running your business to actually running your partners. And with Loop, I'm so happy because I have one partner, which is my wife, and one board which is Courchain Larose, that are partners with us in the business, and it's a dream team, because everybody brings the right thing. And Courchain Larose, our partner, they're good in logistics, they're good in operation. And Julie and I, my wife and I, we're actually very good in marketing and branding and creating a story. So we can actually really bring our forces to the table together, right? And I think with circular economy, what's even deeper with partners is that instead of having shareholders with us, we're actually creating abundance and a business flow for other companies. We have a beer co-packer, and they have twice more employees because we're there with them, right? And they actually sell the beer for us with a branded license, and so they actually make the profit out of the beer, and they give us a royalty. Same thing for a soap factory. We have a soap factory that makes soap for us, and they have so much more employees and so much more better machinery because they can actually have more volume because we give them our volume, right? So the idea is to actually not own everything ourselves, but creating so many products so fast, you need partnerships around there that they can actually grow their own business with your help, and basically sharing the concept of the circular economy.
Super interesting model, David. Thanks so much for sharing it. And you're going to hang around. We'll have your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur on the way. First, we welcome back our contributor, Nick Moraitis, tax partner at FL, to talk about, taxes, of course. And we'll begin, Nick, with some looming deadlines. Welcome back. How are you?
Very good. Yourself, Dan?
Excellent. Thank you. So we've had, of course, some grace periods over the last few months, naturally, for both home and office. What can you tell us about looming deadlines for September in both categories?
There's one large deadline, taxes that haven't been paid so far this year, and this is for installments for individuals, like the June and September installments, or the taxes owing on your tax return. They're due before September 30th. Otherwise, there's going to be penalties, and we don't know how they're going to calculate it, but it's worthwhile to remember that. This also applies for corporations who do monthly installments or did not pay the corporate taxes that were due on the filing of their corporate tax returns early this year. You got to September 30th. Don't miss that deadline.
Right. I think that was pretty clear there, Nick. We don't want people missing a deadline.
Yeah.
I guess the one of the questions that a lot of people have raised are it's going to be where the subsidies. Obviously, there's a number of issues going forward on a taxation as to how they should be treated, as well as what this is going to mean to our tax rates 18 months or 2 years out from now. Since we don't have that crystal ball, I'll let you start with the easier one. What are the tax implications of some of these wage subsidies and rental subsidies?
Okay, so a lot of this, all this government money that's coming in is subject to tax. So the wage subsidy that many businesses have been relying on is fully taxable income. You're going to be reporting it. If you're suffering losses this year, it would be reducing your losses, so they may not be such a big tax hit. But it also applies to, for those who use the $40,000 CEBA loan, where 25% of it is forgivable if you pay it before December 31st, 2022. Unfortunately, the way the law is written, that say $10,000 savings that you're going to have is taxable today because you got the money today. If you don't pay it by 2022, there's a deduction, but just you have to remember it's taxable today. So that's one of the nuances you may want to pick up. Same thing for the SECRA, for the landlords who are getting the 50% rent covered by the CMHC, and there's also supposed to be a Quebec top up for about 12.5%. That would be, even though it's a forgivable loan, it is taxable in the year that you receive it. So remember that. And for everybody who's been claiming the CERB, I think I mentioned it on the Iron Rand show several times already, all that income is taxable. So that's something that you have to remember with all these programs. I'm just going to move into over two other quick points that I'm very certain that many businesses have suffered losses this year, perhaps to an extent they never had before, and especially since the 2008-2009 crisis. You should know that their losses have a 3-year carryback and a 20-year carry forward provision. What that basically means, the loss you've suffered this year, you can carry it back in the last 3 years where you've had profits and then get back to some of the taxes that you paid. And any losses that are, if it's over and above that, you can use them over the next 20 years. So you should keep that in mind when you're doing it. With losses as well, you may have to be able to adjust installments this year. If you're required to make installments because last year was a very good year, you should reconsider your installments for this year. And if you end up the year with losses, well, that means next year your installments are zero, even though you might be starting to make profits there. So there's something about that. The larger losses in the larger corporations, there's a lot of intergroup services that you should be re-looking at as to where the costs are, etc. And finally, a quick word on home expenses. For many employers, you're probably facing a situation where your employees have been working from home, not because they wanted to, but because they were required to. So where an employee is required to work at home and where the employee spends more than 50% of his working time working from home, an employee can deduct the home office expenses off his personal tax return. What we as employers have to do, however, there's two forms, a federal form, a T2200, and a Quebec form, a TP643, where you're going to indicate that the employee has been working from home because he had to, and for how long. Now, there's a lot of debate, Mike. In the law, it talks about you spending more than 50% of the time working from home as opposed to the office. That usually means January to December, but I'm hearing in the street that the CRA and the MRQ are going to consider that for people who have worked from home, say from mid-March to July, August, that's not exactly 6 months, but they may allow for these deductions to occur for that period of time. That's pretty much what I had to say.
You know, Nick, you always get my blood racing when you bring out those T2200 numbers and all those phone numbers.
Well, it's something that many employers may not have ever filed before. It's going to be something to consider this year.
Thanks very much. Hey, Mike, I'm not late this year. That's positive news. Let's turn to David Côté and ask David, as we do at the end of each broadcast. David, what is your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur?
I think for any entrepreneurs out there that are looking to start a new business or that are, in their first few starts of business, I think the main questions I will ask myself is, does my business is really solving a problem? Like, am I really solving something out there in the society that actually is a yelling problem? That's an obvious thing that can be solved. And here's the thing. If I do, then my business is going to be easier to manage, easier to make a profit of, easier to attract employees because everybody's looking for a purpose and a mission deeper than just working somewhere. And if I don't, then it might be an issue because if I don't, I might be part of the problem. I know that sounds radical, but that's the thing. Most of business out there, they get to a size that might be a threshold where, the bigger you get, eventually you start being pretty bad for the environment. So I think that's my advice, is to really ask ourselves, am I really part of the solution? If not, I might be part of the problem.
I don't think, David, you could have tied in any better to one of our earlier stories in the show, which was definition of success in a business. You've just redefined what I think a lot of the newer entrepreneurs are looking at is, am I going to make a difference? Am I solving a problem? And not just, am I lining my pockets at the end of the day? This will be a debate that will rage on for a long time to come. But thank you, David, for your time and your energy and what you're doing out there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, David. And don't forget for some tax advice, corporate tax matters, visit the blogs at flmontreal.com. And by the way, also at todaysentrepreneur.org, where we house 200 plus of these shows, you can actually learn about David's first business, Rise Kombucha, which was a profile a few years ago. So Rise Kombucha is also at todaysentrepreneur.org. Mike, it was a pleasure. I hope you found the first episode to your liking.
Generally, I'm not the problem. It's everybody tolerating me. So long as you liked it, Dan, we're good to go.
We are good to go. Back Monday night at 7 p.m. here at CJD 800. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
This has been a production of TNKR Media. Good talk.